Right, hi, welcome to this January 2021 Open Security Summit session with one of my probably longest AppSec friends, Jim Manico. Probably one of the few people in the world I can say is as crazy, if not crazier than me, right, in some of his ideas. And both of us are very passionate about security. We have clashed heads politely in the past, very nicely. And this is going to be a really interesting one. And actually, Jim, you do deserve the prize for the best questions or the most questions, because this week we've been doing OWASP board, Jeremiah Grossman and you, and I put a form and you had the most questions in the form, right? So it's cool, right? So I wanted to start, just give me just a very quick sort of introduction of your career, like kind of just your line of your path and how you got to today, right?
Well, Dinis, my career began when I was 13 experimenting with Commodore 64s, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I was a professional programmer for over a decade. I spent a lot of 80-hour weeks coding because I couldn't put it down. I love to code, and I was coding. It's like the rest of my life would fade away, and days would go by. I was that kind of coder for a decade. Stephen Northcutt from the Sands Institute was local here on Kauai, where I live. I live on Kauai, one of the Hawaiian Islands. Yeah. And at the time, the dot-com bubble had burst, and I was teaching in school, coding remotely for Sun. I looked, and just Stephen Northcutt's offering a big security job. So I went interviewed with him. He's like, "Who are you, Jim?" "Well, I'm a hot shit programmer. I work hard at coding." He's like, all right, swear in my house. How'd you like to protect your career for the next 20 years and come learn security with me? Stephen Northcutt convinced me to switch coding and code for him and do more security work. And he's the one who brought me in and took care of me. Around the same time, I'm arguing with Jeff Williams on the OWASP list, and he was super polite, and he also got me excited about application security. David Wickers, around this time, I worked for him at Aspect. He mentored me and taught me a lot of low levels. Dave Wickers is one of my favorite intellectuals around secure coding knowledge. He's deep into it too. He's a super smart guy. Dave taught me a lot of what I know about security. And then the last 10 years, worked for a couple of security companies, worked for White Hat. I'm primarily an educator. Like my great-grandfather was a teacher. My grandfather was a professor. My dad's a college professor. You know, it's a performance art for me, right? So I like to study, I like to teach, and I started Manico Security, named my company, an education firm, about 4 years ago. And we teach developers to write secure code, Dinis. And I'm busy. The pandemic, I had a few cancels and everyone moved to online. I've been busting my butt through the coronavirus, teaching almost every day, keep my business running. And I'm glad, right? It keeps me busy, keeps me engaged. I love to teach and I love application security. It's not just my job, it's my hobby. So I study a lot and prep, and that's my career. I'm a teacher. That's it.
So we can actually go there, right? Like on the COVID, the impact of, right, and the remote, the remote training, and I actually remember that one of the things that when we met, I have to say one of the things that worried me a little bit, right, was that you were just flying everywhere, right? Like literally, you basically yeah, but it's not healthy, man. It's not. It's fun for the first couple of years, right? But I remember that, the whole flying everywhere. And I think what's interesting now, and I want to kind of get your views on the new normal, right? So we got forced to go full remote, right? So suddenly, people that would go, oh, you have to be on site, you have to do all these things, you now go remote. I actually think that one of the problems we had in the past was get access to the right players, right? Because again, we will force them, for example, on training, on threat model, to be in the same place. Now that we go into the remote model, the talent pool, right, or the audience dramatically expanded. Because you can now, look, even for example, me and Abbas, right, we're planning a training program, and instead of taking 4 days out of the engineering team, right, and now I'm not in an interesting position where I'm the CTO and the CISO, so I control both worlds, right?
Awesome.
I'm going, hey, there's no way as a CTO that I'm going to get all my engineering team to do sec for a week, right? Although I defended, but suddenly to say we're now going to get the teams to do half a day here, but almost
exactly
so much better. So how do you move to the virtual world? And then second question, how do you think the two worlds, the physical and the virtual, are going to work together so that we have a great experience also for the virtual crowd.
So I think for me, the transition to the remote world was seamless. I already taught a lot of classes over Zoom. I already taught another, I like GoToMeeting, by the way, because it's better as a presenter, I believe. So I use GoToMeeting a lot for my business, or what, it's all the same to me. And that's my world now. I do the same teaching, the same shtick, the same bothering students and asking questions that I've always done. It's just a different medium. And the way you win in remote education is you want to record everyone's voice. Let's get really into it. Record the instructor's voice. If their wavelength is like this, they are not a good speaker. They got to have inflection. You have to be almost hard to record, and at different times, raise your voice or back away when people. I'm saying you got to be a good presenter. I'd like to think I am because I've done it for a long time, but it's not like I'm a natural speaker. I hated speaking at first. And I took classes and I learned about it. I did Toastmasters. I practiced a lot. I gave a lot of bad talks and I practiced and put the time in. And I always felt like the art of learning to be a good presenter was going to be critical if I want to be a good educator. So I spent a lot of time working on that and practicing it. And that translates well into things like Zoom, because when I'm presenting, I'm not just lecturing. Everyone's there. And I'm like, hey, Adam, here's a question for you. Adam's like, I don't know. I'm like, hey, Adam, who should we go pick on? Even if they don't get the answer right or they don't want to answer, I still give them a chance to have fun. Let's go pick on one of your friends, like your boss together. And suddenly it's not me lecturing. It's like I'm still leading the charge. It's everyone's comfortable to ask questions. Dinis, when I'm at my worst, people say something wrong and I'm sharp to shut them down. Don't let them finish their thought. That's where I'm being a bad instructor. To make people feel safe, I got to chill out. Let people, and because I'm caffeinated, I'm rolling, but I have to let people talk and let them ask their question and answer it carefully and ask them, hey, did I answer your question appropriately? They sometimes say no. So I keep going until I have. So it's not lecture, it's not speaking skills, it's a combination of all these things, being interactive and doing it in a way where you're not hurting anyone's feelings. Now that may sound trite or simple, but how are people's feelings in your world right now, Dinis? Think of all the people you know. How are people's feelings doing in your world?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. And look, I gave a lot of training too. For a while. It's like you have to have that sensitive, right? So what's your tech stack? Like, you got GoToMeeting. Do you have everybody with the camera on, whiteboard?
Oh no! First of all, I never force students to put their camera on. That's horrible. That's like invasive to their world. So now suddenly they're like, they have to, that's not fair to them. Part of this is I want them to feel safe. I always let them record. So I have GoToMeeting, my tech stack. You ready? GoToMeeting and PowerPoint. PowerPoint is awesome. That's my tech and my brain and research, and to read blogs and watch videos. To debate on Twitter helps me learn. So I have to still keep my brain sharp so I know what the hell I'm talking about. This is a fast moving industry, but I make them, I track when they log in and log out. So I'm like, you got to be on the thing the whole day, because I'm going to send your boss a list of who was in attendance with the times you logged in and out. So if you logged in the morning and weren't there all day, your boss will know it. You don't get credit. So you have to be there. And I'm going to ask you a question. And if you don't want to answer, then you and I are going to pick on someone else to answer the question to make sure you're still with me. It's my job not to emotionally injure anyone, especially now where mental health and everyone's freaking out, because someone may have kids running around like while they're doing their thing, and they can't stop that. And so I don't want to force them to put their video on to make their life more difficult. And I also let people record the class. It's easy on these platforms so they can go back and still grasp the material. And last note, Dinis, when I'm teaching a class for application security, I only get about 5% of people that really participate. And that's fine. I just make sure I identify who the leaders are of that group, who are the main scrum leaders, project managers, and tech leads, and I call on them a lot, make sure they're with me. Because if I can influence 5% of the decision makers and leaders of who builds features and similar and who's doing what in tech, if I can influence the leads and make a couple security champions, then the class is useful. If everybody is excited and gets it, but the leads that make decisions around feature pushing don't get it, then I lost. So I always aim to influence the security champions who are influencers to make sure that the training has impact in an organization.
And the way you carry the class, right? So you got a massive backlog of PowerPoints, right? Since you use PowerPoint, do you then start to halfway through the class, as you understand their feedback and where they are, do you start to adjust the course to go to places that are better?
See, I should let you finish your question, but no, I'm so excited. So I always have to adjust mid-flow, always. I always have, like when I'm teaching my SQL injection and someone says, I want SQL injection, we've had a lot of it lately, so do a full hour and explain it in detail. I go in with 2 hours worth of slides. So if they get it, I'll rock and roll and move fast and skip some basics. If they don't get it, I'll slow down and just teach. So I have to adjust based on the feedback I'm getting. Dinis, I have a wild brain. Like I have ADD, I really do. Like things like reading is hard for me, but digesting streams of information from 10 different sources in real time, my brain's good at that. But again, reading an article that's 10 pages long, a white paper on OAuth, I am not good at that. That takes me 10, 11 reads to get it like someone would read it once or twice. So reading's hard for me. But getting this information from students, from text, from the like how they're feeling emotionally to like all these little tiny details and reading that in real time and adjusting, my brain's good at that. So I always I'm getting all this input from everyone and making real-time adjustments and sometimes switching out to a different topic, sometimes stopping and addressing someone's question for 20 minutes. Sometimes it's politely shutting someone down who's now lectured in my class for the 10th time saying completely incorrect things. Putting that in the space, I have to shut them down politely without insulting them because they hired me. So I have to make all these calls in real time. My brain's not good at everything, but it's good at that. And I practice doing it properly. And I make mistakes along the way and I adjust and learn too.
So what about the next evolution of this, right? Because in the past, right, there was a massive asymmetry between on-site and remote, right? So if you were on-site on a training session, right, or in a conference or in a meeting, there was definitely a massive difference, right, between the experience for the people on site and the people remote. I think we now get to the point where we do know that the wider talent pool, like for example, getting those decision makers in a room might not be possible, but you might get them remote. So what are your ideas or thinking of when we go back to doing on-site live events? What can we change to keep the remote experience as good as it is now?
So let me start with this. Dinis, here I am on Kauai, right on the beach, small apartment, nice fast internet. I have whatever I need is delivered to me. Everyone's like, oh, that's great, Jim. And I'm like, get me out of here, Dinis. Get me on a plane. The second my customers tell me to get on a plane, I am on the road again because you're always worried about me. Dinis, I don't have kids, right? And so it's like, I have wanderlust. I need to be on the road. I'm gonna be a road warrior for another 10 years, and I'm okay with that because it's not something that's draining for me, Dinis. It feeds my soul, man. And if I had 2 young ones, it'd be a different story. But I just didn't go that route in life, and so, my kids are the young engineers I meet around the world and help mentor their career. Those are my kids, right?
Yeah, but my question is more of how can we make sure that we improve the experience of the remote participants on those on-site meetings? So yeah, you're going to go out there, you're going to start delivering your on-site, but I'm with you. See a lot more remote participants.
I purposely didn't answer your question just to be like for me, I know you're always worried about me being on the road. And as you're worrying, I'm booking as much travel as I could because I want you to know, again, it feeds my soul. And Dinis, I lost a lot of weight, not being at home. I lost weight on the road using gyms and because I got Uber Eats. I can order any food I want. I can go order 4 pizzas or I can order salads delivered to my door, and I got gyms everywhere I go. So I got more, I gained weight more coming back home and sitting on my ass. Yeah. Being on the road was always more healthy for me. So let me actually answer your question. The online experience is about, as a teacher, is about never lecturing for too long. It's about having the ability to, first of all, you should have all your slides memorized and be able to go through them in a nonlinear fashion, number one. Number two, the little speeches you have as an educator, you shouldn't be figuring those out on the fly with your customers. Like if I have a new module, I'll teach it for free a couple of times until it's available commercially. So number two, you got to be a good teacher and do your homework. I'm a student. I study a lot, Dinis. You know, we get in debates and all of a sudden I start spitting out all these like many micro details about web stuff. Like there's people a lot deeper than me, but I'm just saying I continue to study to make sure I can hang in these conversations. And Dinis, it's hard. It's difficult to keep up, like origin policy. Oh my God, there's so many. I thought I knew cores until I had to teach it. There's so many idiosyncrasies there. So back to your question. You've got to know your material. And you have to be a good presenter, Dinis. You have to practice the art of giving a compelling conversation. I recommend the organization Toastmasters and actively work at Toastmasters and give a bunch of talks, and they'll give you pointers of how to do it more professionally. They're a great organization. They're a cult that teaches you how to be a good presenter. They're not that bad of a cult, but they're a cult. Oh, this weird cult. ISSA, super weird cult, but nice people. Toastmasters, super weird cult, will teach you how to be a good speaker. And last, it's not enough to be a good speaker. You have to know how to like riff with students. You have to know how, like, because you're not getting any participation by default often. So you got to ask the student questions in a way that lifts them up, even when they give a wrong answer. Even when they're asking the wrong question, you got to not do emotional damage. So I try to and I make mistakes here. Like, no, that's wrong. And I sometimes go, whoa, everyone stop. By the way, yes, that was wrong. I'm sorry. I got a little getting excited. And I'll even stop and apologize. Everyone relaxes. If I'm getting like all manic and oh, it's wrong. No, how dare you? How dare you say that signature type is wrong? And I'll go, whoa, let's take a whoa moment. The fact that he said it was, the fact that he was talking about symmetric signatures versus asymmetric signatures doesn't mean I should raise my voice at him, and I'll stop. So I get excited. So that's the piece. Don't hurt the students. Be interactive with them. That's your job. Be a good presenter and be a good academic. Do your homework before you jump into class. That's the formula for a good online class. It's hard work, Dinis. It's not easy.
And I guess when you have the both on-site and on-site, then it's about making sure that you pay as much attention to the online than to the on-site one.
When I'm doing an on-site teaching, it's usually 30 people physically in front of me and a smaller number remote. And I ask my customer, do you want me to cater to the students in the room, or do you want me to cater to the remote students, or do you want me to cater to having a good recording? And I let the customer choose. If they want a good recording, then I'm less into questions and I'm focusing on making a recording product for them, and people get to watch and ask some questions. If they want me to cater to the people in the room, then I'm less interested in fielding all the online questions. I do that less periodically when I have a proper gap. If they want me to cater to the remote crowd, then I'll teach to my laptop, and those in the room will not get my attention as much, right? They have to pull me away from the laptop. I can only do so much at once. So it's a matter of asking my customer what their priorities are, and I adjust based on their needs. So they all have a different wish.
Yeah. No, great.
Solved.
Great. Question for you. As a teacher, do you feel like university degrees in the technology field are worth the same value they had 15 years ago? Or do you think university degrees are dying?
No, I think going to university is still important if you can afford it. If especially in Europe, where you're not paying for your education, you're not writing a check directly for it, you pay for it in other ways. Why not? Because you got to learn degree. College is not just about getting a tech degree. It's also about growing the bleep up as a person. It's also about learning how to take care of yourself. outside, because your mommy was taking care of you in high school. You don't get that anymore in college. You have to learn. So here's my belief. You go get an apartment and learn how to like cook for yourself, take care of your apartment, and take care of your bills, and take care of issues in life, then go get a job. Because like if you get a job and you're like wet behind the ears, and you're not going to be as an effective employee if you're like not able to pay your bills because you forget about them or whatever. So I like university, yes, because you're going to learn how to learn. What you learn doesn't matter, in my opinion. You're going to learn how to study. You're going to learn how to do labs. You're going to learn how to figure things out. And that's because with IT, it doesn't matter what you know, but to be a successful IT professional, you're in a nonstop, constant state of learning all this new information. You got to absorb it, filter it, and make new IT decisions. And I think university is going to be instrumental, let you experiment in that arena, right? I don't think they're dying. University degree is great. And I know the best universities are getting more flexible as well, right? The things that they're learning, they're giving students more options to self-learn as well. Yep. But for a lot of reasons, I'm still a big fan of higher education.
And I guess the good news is that, this industry, right, there's still so much to do. There's still so much to learn, right? That, one of the comments that was interesting as with Jeremiah Grossman was like, it is pretty cool to be 20 years into your career and still be as excited as we are about it. And then actually not being in one of those careers where we almost have to go, yeah, sorry, new generation, but it was really cool 20 years ago. But now everything is mature, and now you basically have this gigantic hill to crawl to even be a player, right? Like, some industries need that, right? Like to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, right? Like, come on, the paths are amazing, right? I think cybersecurity and development, it's like you can totally whisk your way into it, learn on the go, and then become an amazing professional.
I agree with you 100%. I wrote my first access control servlet in 97. So it's like, and I'm still like really excited about this stuff. It's not just my job, it's my fun. Let's talk about Jeremiah Grossman for a second. Dinis, you and I, we love a good argument, whether we may not like the effects of it after, but you and I are quick to argue. We're quick to dive into debate. We're quick to like make giant changes to fix something. We have no boundaries. Look at Jeremiah though. Jeremiah, he argues, but he's always a civil gentleman. I try to be, I know you try to be, we're not always there, I dare say, but Jeremiah, I like him not just because of his tech skill and his business acumen and his his physical fitness capabilities as a martial artist. He's also even when he doesn't agree with you, he's a genuinely nice, kind person who has control over what he says. And like, I'm not like that. Most of my friends are not like that, but I look at Jeremiah with a lot of respect. That's why I see him as a real leader in our industry, because of his poise and because of how safe it is. Anyone can approach him and they're safe. Some people approach me, I'm going to scream at them because I'm a crazy person at times. But Jeremiah, I look up to him as a personality in terms of leadership that we need in this industry. So a little call out to Jer.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So actually, just to finish the training bit. So what's your advice to learn, to start, and this could be of any age, right? Or any kind of career path. But if they want to get into AppSec, application security, making applications more secure, what are good paths into that world?
When I say this stuff, last time I said this, I had a lot of friends of mine block me on Twitter and get extremely mad at me. And I'm not trying to do that. But if you're in application security, guess what I think is the first thing you should learn how to do? It's write code, be a coder. If you don't know the basics about software engineering, it highly limits your ability to be successful in application security. And I don't really see governance, GRC, as really deep security. I see that more as a business function. I'm not saying it's not important, and I'm just saying it in the world of application security, I don't put governance in the center of that world. It is one of the tiers of OpenSAM, but I'm more of a technical focused AppSec professional. Yeah. And if you want to be technically successful in application security, it all starts with some learning around how to write software.
The thing I would add is that you have to be a developer at heart. And one of the things I found interesting, especially as we want to get a more diverse workforce, right? And we want to hire from different talent pools. One of the things I found myself is almost starting to explain, for example, to a scientist that they are a developer, right? And they're like, oh no, I don't code, I don't write code. I'm like, no. What you just explained to me in your field, which I get like completely over my head, but what I recognize is that are all the primitives for coding. What I recognize is that ability to break down problems, to codify things, to build building blocks, right? All of that is coding. The fact that we do it in a programming language is just a way to express that, right? And that's why I think you find that some scientists make a very good jump to be developers.
Oh, yeah.
Because
musicians too.
Absolutely. A musician, right, especially one that has a good grasp of the theory and the practice, they are coding. Right, so I think that's a very interesting. So the caveat that I add today is to say you cannot do AppSec without being a developer, but you can be a developer from all sorts of paths. Being a developer doesn't mean writing code. You have to eventually write code because that's the language that we speak. But I think that there is, we miss a trick by not creating lots of pathways from different industries into both AppSec and development.
I agree. Now, lately, what I do like, though, about the modern era is there are a lot of these like coding camps. They're not perfect. They're controversial, but I can go spend a modest amount of money, go do like a 3-month immersion, and pop out of that program and make close to 6 figures in terms of a salary. That's pretty impressive. Or you could go learn to code online. There's so many free resources to learn to code. So AppSec professionals that get mad at me when I say you got to learn to code to be a good AppSec professional, there's always exceptions to this rule. I know several total ninja class pen testers who are not really coders. They just do pen testing, and they are exceptional at what they do. There are exceptions, but if you want to like shut me up, go take a 1-hour class on basics, learn a for loop, learn basic of it, just a little bit, and I'm happy. It checks my box and I'll shut up. But learn a little bit about what code means and how it works. I learned one markup language like HTML and one dynamic language like JavaScript, just some basics. And now you're in the club. You understand the basics of how code works. I'm not saying you got to be a professional software developer. It helps. But the more you code, the better of an AppSec pro you're going to be. And if you want to break into it, learn to code. It'll open up so many possibilities for your career if you can code. It really will.
And so here's where I sometimes I'm a bit also controversial, which is I actually feel that there's a spectrum of, maybe evolution is not the right word, sorry, but I do feel that you should start by breaking shit because it's the best way to understand the side effects. It's also very fun, but also opens up your mind a lot. I think it's very good to have that mindset that we have, that it's not if, it's almost how, right? It's like there's always a way around it. But the bottom line is that the evolution is to being able to write secure code, right? Writing secure code, writing secure applications is much harder than breaking it. Right now, there's people that want to specialize in breaking, and that's cool, right? But that's a very, I would say, narrow focus, right? Being able to actually write systems that are resilient and secure, it's a very, very hard skill set, right?
Yes. I mean, I think to your point, getting breaking knowledge early, I think is important. So my flow with different people I mentor is, let's learn the basics of how a web application works. And then I'm going to fire up Shepherd for you and demonstrate a bunch of hacks early on. So because when I do the breaking examples, I want them to know already what SQL is, the basics of how an app runs, the basics of HTML, just a few basics. But so basic coding, some basic breaking early on, and then the secure coding knowledge. I know engineers who've been coding for decades who continue to study this stuff because it's so complicated. Like, it should be easy. Use React and XSS is gone. But no, we can come up with like 10 rules of how you need to use React securely. So the nuance of how to really do it is so deep, Dinis. It is. So it requires like constant new learning. And by the way, a lot of managers who've talked to me about training, I'm going to call someone out. One of the big, and I have no NDA, I'm not breaking anything, but I had this weird experience with Netflix. Netflix, one of their engineers called me and said, we need security training. Can you talk to one of our managers? And they called me, first of all. They contacted me. I'm like, great. So next thing I know, I'm on a conference call with one of their senior managers, and she's like, we don't need training here at Netflix. And I'm like, then why did you get me on this call? She's like, well, we don't really need training here. We already have a really secure framework. We don't need training. We just need a little bit of training, a little bit of knowledge of how to use a framework securely. And I'm like, wait a second. You got me on the call, a known secure coding trainer. It's what I do for a living. And now I'm talking to you. And the first thing you're going to tell me is that secure coding training is not necessary for your company. And I'm like, who the hell are you? And she's like, I'm the super senior. I looked her up. She's like, one of the super senior managers there. I'm like, I don't care who you are. You're being, first of all, you're rude, and you're rude to me. 2, why did you get me on this call? And 3, for you to tell me that developers having secure coding knowledge through secure coding education is not important, that proves me you're an idiot. And I hung up on her. That was and go ahead, call me out, Netflix. I'm no NDA with you. It's Netflix. And like, so that kind of thinking still proliferates around some of the Illuminati of leadership out there. They don't want to do education, because they got all figured out already. Let me tell you this, Dinis, Netflix threat model, one of the stupid easiest ones out there. If I had Netflix's threat model, by the way, we can go build a Netflix from scratch in 5 minutes with open source software. But if I had that trivial user-based threat model, I wouldn't need secure coding training either. Most of us live in the world of real complexity other than Netflix's BS. And we need secure coding training because of how varied and different the frameworks are that most of us are using. Not all of us have one pretty framework and a real simple threat model of displaying movies, right? Most of us have more rigorous complexity to deal with and a variance of frameworks and techniques. So and I'm not saying this to tout my horn. I don't care who you hire, but secure coding education, I believe, is fundamental to all engineering teams today. And the more we can customize it the more that we can customize that to a very specific framework, the more we can customize it to what the users are doing, what the developers are doing, the better. I agree with that. But we still need education. We still need developers to have a fundamental knowledge of the basics. And I yearn for a day when that will not be true. I yearn for a day when I can really hand something to developers and they can do anything they want, and SQL injection or XSS or access control problems or authentication flows are going to be secure. But that's not the way the world works today. Even something as simple as, not simple, like, oh, the word, one more note. So people say, Dinis, don't write your own authentication code anymore. Use an identity provider. Well, guess what? Implementing an identity provider is not trivial. It's super complicated. A lot of moving parts to get right, and you could make mistakes. So developers, anyone who tells you you don't need to learn about security is doing you a disservice.
Yeah, the more interesting question is at what layer you are creating security vulnerabilities, right? So if you look at that conversation, and we actually, I think the first time we had an interesting clash was on the use of secure frameworks, right? And how that could be done. And there is a lot of value of pushing almost security up the stack, right? So if you have a framework that you can shoot yourself in the foot, right? Every time you write a line of code, that's going to be a lot more dangerous that's going to be more dangerous to use than a framework that, for example, moves, puts a lot of things in the framework, right? Security. But the problem that actually you raise, that I don't think a lot of people raise, is that sometimes what you do is you move the abstraction up. And now you can still create tons of vulnerabilities within the levels of abstractions. And you might actually have a false sense of security by thinking, well, the framework handles everything, right? But it definitely makes a massive difference. It's a great way to scale, right? Because the more the frameworks that you do exist, and it's almost like you said, the more the threat model is smaller, the easier it is to protect.
I'll go one further, Dinis. The more your framework is forcing security on you, the more you're constrained as a developer. And suddenly some of the edge case things you need to do are more difficult because you're in a very strict, specific framework. This is my rule of secure frameworks. Again, the more secure your framework is, the more constrained your developers are, and the more difficult it is for them to do edge case type of features. And the more loose and open your framework is from a security point of view, where you have to do it yourself, the easier it is to handle the edge cases and other features you need to do, but the more difficult and time consuming it is to lock it down. So there is no magic answer. Go ahead, build me the most secure framework, and you're gonna have to build all these exceptions in so I can still get my job done. So it's still, to me, even in the era of secure frameworks beginning to proliferate, your developers still need to approach development with the right engineering knowledge about security within their specific domain of web or mobile or API, and that's hard. It's a non-trivial, difficult engineering task.
So now let's address one of the topics that we are also very passionate about, which is static analysis, right? And it's actually, for me, it's a very frustrating world, because it's a world that, again, I experienced very heavily. I was involved in one of the engines on the Ounce Labs. I built the O2 platform, a great way to take value of it, the engines. And my biggest frustration was how the static analysis world creates the engines, right? The commercial engines. They create this entire object model of the code, which is freaking insane, right? Because it's actually an object that you can query. And then they almost don't do very little with it. And the point I wanted to start on is that I think the balance between what you just described, which is frameworks that are very restrictive, who now have lots of limitations, and frameworks that are less restrictive, but have more dangerous, is if you have static analysis that understands the side effects, you almost get the best of both worlds, because you almost start to allow people to code in the areas where it's very safe. But every time you go to those areas that it's unsafer, you get a lot of information, a lot of alerts going, or even good data to say, look, be careful, or you just connected these two dots that really shouldn't be connected. And I know you're not seeing it, but behind the scenes, this is what's happening.
So let me see if I got this straight. So two of the big static analysis developers that I know about, I know three. I know John Steven did a lot of Fortify work. I've had a lot of conversations with him. I know you and your O2 work, you're really big into formal modeling. Then I know Dr. Justin Collins, who wrote the Brakeman gem for Ruby on Rails, and Eric Sheridan, who wrote static analysis for White Hat Security. I sold two static analysis companies. I sold one to White Hat with Eric Sheridan, Jerry Hoff, and I sold Brakeman with Dr. Collins and Neil Matatol to Synopsys. So as a businessman, I have experience in this area. So I look at you, the formal model guy, and I've looked at some of the things you've done with O2, and it's like you have a level of analysis that you can do that no one else is even close to at one level. I think putting that capability in the hands of the mass of developers has been a challenge for those formal model technologies. Then I get someone like Dr. Justin Collins, the way he wrote Brakeman, I look into it, oh my God, this is like some regexing, some like skip that. I'm saying when I go into his engine, it is not formal modeling. It's a bunch of random techniques that work for specific needs. And I think that, and I look at all the other static analysis Ruby on Rails, no one touches Brakeman in my opinion. Brakeman's one of the best out there. It's open source because he didn't just formally model everything. He used a grab bag of techniques that work for different vulnerability type of hunting. So I know that world provides less fidelity than the O2 world, but it gives me operational results a lot faster. So I run the gem, get results, they're pretty sound, I address them. So I like, what I want is a combination of both. Like for my average developer in the daily DevOps run, because Dinis, the era where we sit and do static analysis for hours is fading. They want me to do static analysis in under 120 seconds now. So in under 120 seconds, this is the DevOps check-in point. I'm gonna run a Brakeman or otherwise configured tool to run really fast.
Yeah.
And then once a day or once a week with my AppSec expert, I'm going to run a formal model tool with incredible depth and analysis. Because if there's a way I can get that analysis, the deep formal modeling analysis at DevOps speed, it wins. I just haven't seen like Fortify run in like 120 seconds meaningfully. They run for hours. So this is my thought. Like, how do you run fast? This is why I like SemGrep.
Yeah.
Open source. It's made for speed, and I can put it into a DevOps pipeline fast and easy with little hassle. And that's a powerful thing to enable developers. And what happens to you and all your formal modeling work? They're like, sorry, Dinis, that's too much work. Even though the work that you do can analyze software from a security perspective way beyond anyone else. I concur with that. So this is that's my general thoughts on the different technologies out there. From my limited knowledge, you spent years building SaaS. You have more knowledge than I do in this area. But from my limited knowledge, that's where I'm at, Dinis.
Well, what I think is interesting is to branch out of security, right? Like, so if you think about it, if I now put my CTO and my CISO hat on, right, I would actually argue that if a static analysis engine actually worked in a way that it should work, and he gave me very good modeling of what's going on, and allowed me to apply really good business rules and security rules to the code, actually from a coding and a technology, that's even more valuable than security. Right? Like in a way, what you want in technology development is consistency, is the understanding, is no side effects, is really good, mature, like, alignment between what the developers are writing and the threats you're doing. I think security is a great, almost like canary in a coal mine. It tells you things that almost are wrong in how you're using the technology. But again, I guarantee you, right, any team that writes security vulnerabilities, right, is going to be writing another 20 business logic problems, right? Because it just shows the lack of understanding of the frameworks that they're using, right? So again, like most security vulnerabilities, they cause, not because the developer woke up one day and says, I'm going to write a freaking vulnerability,
exactly.
Right? It's just because they don't realize that when you connect this line with that line, when this data field with that data field, there's a sequence of events that are now occurring that are not possible, which can occur at micro level, but can also occur at AWS level.
I believe it. As a side note, this is why I think it's usually easier for a full stack developer to understand application security than someone who specializes in like the UI layer, or specializes in, I only do UI, I only do API stuff, or I'm a database guy, right? Part of the world of agile is to shake that up and let people move your pros around so they get the full stack. But to your point, I think once you understand how data flows from input to back end and back again, the whole journey, like, the whole like Hobbit journey, like from the forgotten, what is it, from the Lord of the Rings, from there and back again. When you get that from the first Hobbit movie to the last ring in the pit, and you get that whole flow, it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand complicated application security issues. Again, Dinis, it's about knowing how to code, or at least understanding code architecture and code archaeology, right? How to dig into code and understand how it works. You really need that skill to be a deep application security professional, in my opinion. Full stack is even better. Full stack is better.
Look, and I would argue that from a business value, it is massively value to be able to understand how applications work, right? Because, the thing that frustrates me the most on all the application security world is that I feel that we haven't even started, right? Like, I feel that we're still almost waiting for the business to really be asking very hard questions on, for example, how applications work, where we actually are very good at answering, but almost nobody wants to know. Everybody just wants to go, just ship it, make it work. If it's not super bad, it's great, right? And some companies have evolved on it, but there's still this massive lack of understanding,
I know,
right, for how software works.
Certain industries are worse at that than others. I'll just say there's certain industries that I've interfaced with that I would consider to be macho. They're very macho leadership, very sales-centric leadership, very macho. They don't care about how the software works usually. They care about bottom line stuff. But the more I look at an engineering firm or somebody who themselves is writing software as for other customers, the more I get to a tech company, the more I get to someone writing software for some other company, the more they care about it. The more they want to do formal modeling or care about tools like Rational and some of the work that you've done in the past. And they really want to like model their software and think through, how about this, Dinis? They want to think through what they're doing and model it before they do it. Wow, I don't see that anymore. But I do have customers like that. They tend to be engineering heavy firms, not the not the macho company. Yeah, go sales. Not so much in my experience.
And the frustrating thing is that we now start to have evidence that those companies that take engineering seriously, right? Those companies that ship into production fast, that have those practices, are actually a better business. They make more money.
Oh yeah,
they are more effective, right?
You can build software faster and innovate faster without doing any damage. And here's the thing: when you're really good at engineering discipline, you get your initial things out the door later than others. But once you're in play and you have engineering discipline, you can get stuff out and edit and move and add new features much faster than those who are doing cowboy coding. Cowboy coders get stuff out faster, but cowboy coders cannot maintain software long term and do feature pushes in elegant ways, in successful ways, as fast as teams with mature engineering. So all of a sudden, they're cowboy coders, they go fast, they get it working, they get a good business, and now the business requires change, but you got this big, poorly written monolith. Oh, you're gonna pay blood, sweat, and tears, Dinis. You're gonna pay because maintenance gets more expensive. Security, which you're gonna have to do as you grow, that gets more expensive. Finding developers who actually wanna work with your sloppy mess, that gets harder. Developers don't wanna jump into this big, floppy garbage app. You're gonna de-incentivize some of your best talent. See, suddenly I see these companies, it's not to be offensive, where they have huge apps that are generating huge amounts of money, and they're having trouble pulling in talent to really work on them because of how messy they are. On the other hand, if you're doing like strict engineering, you got DevOps pipeline, you have like standards and security architects working with you, getting your initial app out the door is slower. But once you're up and running, you begin to harvest those rewards. So the number of companies who are sweating and don't know what to do because of massive legacy debt, it's the norm and not the exception.
Oh, absolutely. And now that as supply chain starts to get a bit more visibility, right? Even into the recent stuff,
Wait, did you have like the entire US federal government will get rooted in your like disaster bingo card? Because I did. I literally had it. Entire US government is rooted. That's what and I was like, bingo! Yeah, I'm not like celebrating it, but did you have that on your 2020 bingo card? The entire US federal government and any company, big company in the world just got rooted? Did you see that coming, Dinis?
Well, I see that because I'm expecting that to happen regularly. The problem here, right, is that I feel that we still do this mistake, which is we measure the impact by the ceiling of the exploit. So it basically means that we measure the impact by the business model of the attacker, right? Not what could happen. So this could be an incident that would have changed our industry. I don't think it is. I think it's going to move the needle, like all the incidents does. But it's not going to be that wake-up call that we really needed, and we still will need to say, we can't continue to freaking run our complete infrastructure like this, right?
There have been so many wake-up calls, people are desensitized to it, but I think that's a fair point. How many wake-up calls do we need to like make major changes? I don't have the answer for that.
But it's a natural evolution, right? The question is, and I think software, I think if you look at history, there's lots of things, technologies that occur that they start to get more popular and they start to cause damage when not used properly, right? The problem is the scope, almost like the impact in society for those technologies. And there was enough time between problems occurring, right? And us being able to regulate how it works, right? So then you don't have a cowboy. Like your house is built in certain ways, because there is a lot of houses built 50 years, 100 years ago that freaking collapse. And then we have regulations, right? We have more regulation in the screw, right, than we have in most software that runs our entire planet.
I concur.
Right? So I feel
I'll tell you this, on that note, like a lock manufacturer contacted me. They verify physical locks and certify them. Yeah. And they're like, how? And they know in a cost boxed way how to evaluate a lock to see what the security of it is. They're really good at this. And they called me and they're like, we have this new era of smart locks. You mean where locks are now hooked to an internet service, mobile app, and web app, all in a mesh to do? They're like, yeah. how do we audit that in a cost-effective way? And I wrote back and said, you're never going to be able to, because you go in, you certify the lock system, and you spend 200 grand to hire pen testers and IoT security testers, and you do the best assessment, $250,000, let's say you spend, and you certify it as secure. And that vendor tomorrow issues a patch, and the whole system is now belly up. And you need to certify every single patch. You'll never be able to do it as fast as the lock manufacturers need to go. And you as a lock verifier will never, in the modern era, with the same integrity you do with physical locks, ever be able to verify an electronic online IoT-based locking system. And that's the reality of the world, Dinis. You know, how can you be a certifying body that says this electronic lock, which has a mobile app, which has a web interface, and this company built their own interface they're hosting on Amazon, and now it's going to lock your house? How can we verify that system with that many players to truly assure that this is a secure system? I don't know how to do that. And if anyone does, let me know. Because there's a couple lock manufacturers who are fighting with this right now.
Yeah, but what we need is a layered, right, level of assurance, right? So think about it. The reason why the locksmith is able to do that for locks is because when he buys iron to build his lock, the iron that he buys comes with properties, comes with assurances, right? When he buys every component that he buys on the physical system, comes with a whole history or a whole layer of other standards, other quality, other assurance, right? We today don't still have that in software. We can't visualize that properly, right?
I agree. Jeff Williams was the first to talk about this like 20 years ago. I don't know. How old is Jeff? Jeff's like 80 now or something. But when Jeff was younger, I'm kidding. He came out with the idea of a like the ingredients label that we see on food. He wants to see that on an app. I mean, of course we want to see that. Any kind of visibility into engineering products that we depend on is absolutely great. But I'm also worried about this because let me ask you this. How many companies that got popped by this recent backdoor how many of them had gone through an elaborate vendor assessment process and certified that this vendor was doing proper security processes? I'll give you an answer, Dinis, almost all of them. So how do you do real assurance, not the bullshit vendor, pardon my language, Dinis, not the bell bleep assurance that we do to verify vendors? That's a lot of paperwork and no real assurance.
Well, that's the key. The key is
a lot of paperwork, no real assurance.
Yeah, because today security is still a marketing exercise, right? Because there's no stick. So like you said, if I want to verify a particular company third party, I have no power to go and ask real questions. What I get is almost what the marketing department allow them to publish.
Exactly, and that does not help me. That gives me some measure of liability. I don't know. You know what? I'm not going to comment because it needs to change, and those discussions are happening at the very least. I hope.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's continue on AppSec, right? On the static analysis. I think it's a really cool, right? Let's talk to me about SEMGREP. So I'm a big fan, but I know you're also a big fan too. Why and how do you see it being used?
I want to disclose I signed a reseller agreement with them about 6 hours ago. So I'm all jazzed, and I approached them, right? Because I believe what they're doing. So I am now jaded, and my opinion should be taken with a grain of salt. But the reason why I approached them and went, love you, and Clint approached me as well, one of the people who work for them, is because I can now, I want to build a DevOps tool chain for my developers. I can get software composition analysis, third-party security. I don't need to pay a penny on that. I get NPM audit, get the OWASP dependency check, other open source tools, and I can do really good third-party library security checking without spending a penny for open source. Check. Number two, DAST. Everybody knows the best free best DAST out there, OWASP, right? And I can augment that with Burp for very little money. And I know Simon Bennett has a new company forking Zap to do something commercial. The point is I can get DAST technology for web and API inexpensive to free. And SAST has always been a gap. There's a few out there for certain languages, but nothing enterprise class. And this is where SEMGREP comes in. It's open source. Oh yeah, open source. I know companies running this against hundreds of apps without spending a penny on the actual product. SEMGREP makes their money in cloud services and other ways I'm still learning about. but I can really use SemGrep as a enterprise class static analysis engine for free to get started. And I'm not a DevOps guy in a hands-on way, but I went from Jenkins, getting that kind of installed, to like having every time I did a check-in, to get SAST, DAST, and SCA running in a very short amount of time with this tool suite. A lot of documentation on how to do it now. So for the first time in history, I can do a complete application security automated set of security tests from the open source world. Finally, we're there, in my opinion. And that lets the path to entry into this work, into doing application security testing, become a lot cheaper before you branch into commercial offerings, which still have value. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and I think that was the problem before. So the lack of that end-to-end flow, and almost the inability to start feeding one tool to the other, right? Putting context into one tool, getting all that thing was a massive issue, right? What I like about SendGrep is that, in a way, is saying, I'm going to solve this problem at the smaller scale, but I'm going to do it, like you said, in 120 seconds, right? That I need to do it, right? I'm going to do it super fast. And actually, it almost comes down to that very dirty secret. I remember thinking that, you spend all this money on a static analysis tool, right, to get findings. And I always thinking, it's better to hire a human to do that, right? And they will do the same thing, sometimes even more effectively. Okay, sometimes it doesn't scale. Of course, there's things that they will pick up, but it's an interesting gap that, in a way, I think the SemGrep guys are tackling, which is almost like we need a mass adoption of static analysis, right? We need the fact that you analyze your software with every commit to it's almost like the same way that now you run a test, and you want to think, you need that. Every commit needs to have a SAST engine.
The compiler should do this, though. We got to get this out of the compiler should be doing this. Java-C, my JavaScript, if you're doing TypeScript, but I think this should be more low level and automatic.
The
CI, it should be a separate tool suite. I want to integrate it into my build tools from the ground up. The best folks who can do static analysis in Java would be the Java-C development team at Oracle or in the open source world. The compiler developers, I wish it was built in. They're starting to do little bits of it, little bits.
Yeah.
I digress. So, but let's do a great snark tweet comment. Just bear with me. Number 1, buy a 6-figure SaaS tool. 2, configure it and turn off most of the rules. 3, now it can run in a DevOps environment in under 120 seconds. #DevOps. You're taking this great, elaborate, detailed tool. When you let it run for hours, it does great analysis, and you're turning all that stuff off so it runs fast. And this is, I can only imagine what you're thinking about this, because you want the opposite. Let me show you how to formally model so we can do real elaborate analysis. But the directions, like I was saying, is the opposite. 120 seconds, Dinis. Come on, Dinis. Where's my results? You want a person to evaluate it? You're out. Come on, scanning, quick, give me my results. DevOps. And that's great at one level. It's horrible at another level, being constrained to DevOps speed. I hate it at some level. I love it at another, but it's problematic as well.
Yeah, I think you have a bit more time than 120 seconds, but you're right? It can't.
60 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm a developer checking in code. How long going to make me wait?
Yeah. The problem is context, right? The problem is it has to come within the context, right, of what you're talking about, right? So the party trick at the end, when I had the ounce engine and the O2 really evolve, you know how I used to do a static analysis? I would take an app, I would delete all the rules. Literally, I'll delete all the rules from the database. Then I will run the first pass where they have a mode where I could create an object model. And then I had the object model, and I would spend a couple of hours tagging every function, right, to what I wanted it to give to me. And then I would run the analysis, and I would get very fast results because I had killed most of the rules, right? And I had very accurate results. And that was really cool. And I remember when IBM bought it, my joke was, hey, where do I send my address so you can send me the mainframe to my house? Because I know what to do with it, right? I was like, at the time, I was running on freaking bare machines, right? The cloud didn't exist, right? If I had the cloud, I probably could have got closer to those speeds, right?
And one more note, Dinis. Think of all the critical infrastructure code or code that runs billions of users' identities in storage, and other code that, if compromised, would lead to global events. This is where formal modeling and the work that you've been doing for years is, I think, most important. Don't worry about the little enterprise apps for now. I don't think that's as critical, but I would keep pushing on the, and I use formal modeling as a loose term, right? But I think that's still fundamental on certain software systems that, like in the world of the US government, we have 863.3, we have an authentication standard for digital media, and there's really clear risk rating diagrams to chart out when to do what level of authentication and similar. For the AAL level 3 critical infrastructure code, this kind of formal modeling is not a nice to have. It's necessary for complicated systems. So it's not this neat little thing that we got there that some people are working on. Some systems, it's necessary to provide safety and other critical attributes.
So here's where I found myself in a very interesting situation, right? Because you know, one of the things that we always talked about is the idea that you need to go into a known good state, right? So if you do the positive, instead of looking for badness, you rewrite into a good state, right? We know that you are a lot more solid, right? Because then you know that you can't go wrong. That's the thing I really like about SemGraph, because they talk about the same things. Instead of sometimes talking about the stuff that you can't, or is almost to start talking about the things that you should be doing, right? Things correctly, right? Then if you use these particular bits, if you use things like this, right? Then it's a lot more scalable, because you almost reducing the scope of what the problems areas are, right?
I love it. Like, the number of XSS attacks I can build into a scanning engine is infinite, but the number of positive patterns I'm looking for in user interface development is like 10 to 15 things. It's still complicated, but it's a subset. Or like, if I'm looking for a parameterized query, if I see anything else, light me up, something weird's going on there. So I agree with that kind of thinking. Absolutely, Dinis.
Yeah, and that so I found myself in an object company, right? Because Glasswall is basically takes a file, builds an object model, then rewrites it, right, in a known good state. Now, imagine doing that for code. How cool will it be that you can start to rewrite code into a good state, right? Or you make sure that certain things, you know, although some of the frameworks might allow it, you almost, like you said, you want the compiler, you want the output to not even have those things, right?
I concur.
And that will make a massive difference. So I want to solve the problem now at a smaller scale, where I can justify the security investment with the engineering benefit, because it allows us to code faster, allow us to ship faster, which I actually think that's what in security we should claim to do, right? Which is, our job is not just to secure things. Our job is to make the business go faster, to make it go more resilient. And yes, it will be secure.
Or at least don't slow it down. Our job, it'd be great to make the business more resilient. That's great. At the very least, don't slow us down. If you can just do that, that's good enough. When security is at its best and it's interwoven with development and other forms of IT, it becomes this sensational accelerator. But it's rare. I'll be happy if you help me find security bugs, teach developers the basics, and don't slow me down. That's not bad for 2021. Dinis, I'm fading. I need water and similar things. I'm fading, my friend.
Do you want to grab some water? We have another 10 minutes. Do you want to grab some water?
Let me grab a glass of water. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I can pause this, can I? Oh, cool. So cool. So last topic, right? So we are both passionate about OWASP, right? And actually, I think you mentioned something which I will also give credit, is if you think about it, you said that a lot of the stuff that when you were presenting, you actually were honing your presenting skills, right? And one of the things that OWASP gave us was a lot of places to present, right?
Yeah.
So now that, you know, in a way, OWASP was literally like the entity that was saying we should be doing security, like for all this time. Now it's more mature. What's your sort of wish list for what? And you're on OWASP board, so again, you know the thing from the inside. In 2020, what's kind of your wish list for OWASP?
I have only one wish for OWASP. I wish that the many passionate core contributors, volunteers, and leaders of the organization would be forgiving that we're an imperfect organization, and even when things don't go your way, to operate in a charitable, peaceful, and respectful way. And I don't always do this myself. I'm a fighter. I love a good argument. But there's blood on the floor for how I'll use we, the royal we, how we as a community have behaved. There's blood on the floor. And people are everyone that I know is emotionally suffering because of the things happening in the world. It's a hard time for everyone. And so I'm reducing who I'm talking to. I don't want to do any harm. I'm an aggressive person. So I want to make sure that everyone's looking at OWASP for what it is. It's a charity. We're supposed to be doing charitable work. And like any charity, it doesn't run perfectly. Oh my, you're not going to get everything you want. When you write these 10-page policy documents that you think is the way it should go, it's probably not going to go that way. So I'm saying, be passionate. Go ahead and discuss what you want to happen, but please try not to hurt anybody because we're not all going to get what we want. And leave staff alone. Stop attacking staff. Whoever attacks staff, all I can say is, what the hell is wrong with you? These are employees of our foundation that are overburdened and get slapped around by a bunch of aggressive hackers all the time. So those of you who want to attack staff, what the hell is wrong with you? Stop doing that. I did that once as a board member, and I learned the hard way. You don't do that in a charity. So I'm not saying these things because I'm some guru. I'm saying it because these are mistakes I've made, mistakes I do make. I'm an OWASP true believer. I believe in this foundation. I believe in our staff. I believe that the board's doing the best they can. I believe in our leaders and contributors all over the world. I've met a lot of them. We're all different people from different cultures, and we've hurt each other because it's usually because we're not getting what we want. Oh, you mean you're changing how the budget works? Yeah, we have to sometimes. Oh, you're changing like the rules of being a chapter leader? Yeah, that happens sometimes. Oh, you're like the rules of projects aren't as fine-tuned enough. Guess what? They're never gonna be. We're not Apache. This is not a perfect foundation, but we've done a lot of good. We've helped a lot of people's careers. We've pumped out a lot of products that change application security. Absolutely, done a lot of great things. We've had a lot of great friendships formed, and we've got a lot of great sub-communities built within our world. And so I'm a true believer. Years later, I love this foundation. It's helped my career. Most of my friends I met from OWASP, and I continue to interact in the ASVS project and the cheat sheet project, which is still off and running. So I love OWASP. I love the community. But if anyone attacks staff, I will become a murderous, ugly person to them immediately. Don't mess with staff. They can't fight for themselves. You think a staff member can scream back at a chapter leader? No, they can't. They're constrained. So you're beating on people that can't fight back. So leave staff alone. Learn to work with staff like an adult. And if you're not getting your way, then please don't damage the staff. And if you're still not getting what you want, then back off. Go find something else to do. There's a million ways to OWASP. Go read the different projects. Look at some of the source code. Find a constructive way to contribute and participate. And if you can't find a constructive, helpful way to participate, then please don't do it. Don't hurt anybody. And if you're going to push for your own views at the policy level, do it with respect. You know, don't scream at the staff or like threaten and all this kind of stupid stuff. Nobody wins. You know who won from the last round of combat that happened at OWASP? You know who won? Nobody. There's no winners. You guys stop the nonsense. So that's my wish for OWASP. And this is not a point in one direction. 3 fingers back at me. This is what I want for myself as well. Approach OWASP with tolerance, forgiveness, no expectation that you're going to get what you want. Find a positive way to contribute. And remember at all times, this is a charity. Let's behave in a charitist way.
Well said.
Is there a word, charitus? Is charitus a word? I like it. I like it anyways. I'm going to go with it.
All right. Promise. Last question, because I was asked this. Your views on chaos engineering.
What's that?
So what's your views on chaos engineering?
I got some friends of mine who have invested heavily in it, and I don't want to hurt their feelings, but I don't give it any credit at all. You want me to like randomly start breaking things as a product? I don't need a product to do that. That's just the way the world works, right? It's like, I don't need to purposely add chaos to my software. I got it already. I think it's a great idea for certain companies, but to build a whole product methodology just on that alone, I don't think that's the appropriate use for it. I see chaos engineering as one of many testing techniques.
Yeah.
And that's where my thought of it ends. I don't want to purposely start breaking systems all over the place. I mean, I want to be resilient to it, but I shouldn't have to purposely drop things to get that kind of success there. So I tend to be thumbs down on it, but I want to also say, I say thumbs down with like 30% assurance, because I haven't spent the hundreds of hours that other people have spent on chaos engineering. And I would ask them more than ask me. I don't have as much knowledge as they do. I would go ask the real chaos engineering experts who've studied it heavily why it works as opposed to traditional QA mechanisms, where chaos engineering is most effective and where chaos engineering is going to be less effective. And I think you'll get a better answer than I can give you, because it's not something I put a lot of attention into. But I tend to not give it a big thumbs up yet, but I'm open to have my mind changed.
Right, Jim, as always, thank you. And this reminds me of those times in late conferences in the bar, debating until the good old, or the summits, right? Debating in the good old times of the morning.
Do you have time for one more thing real quick, Dinis? Take me 1 minute. Okay, I have something for you, Dinis, here. Okay, you can see my screen, Dinis? Yeah. I want to officially say, this is a special moment. You're the first to receive this. I'm giving you the first certificate of Manico. This is awarded to, and I'm renaming you as Dinis Manico for successfully behaving in a manic and wild fashion for many years in a row. You are now Sicilian. You are now a Manico. Need to borrow the car, let me know. Welcome to the family. You're Manico. So there's your official certificate of Manico. And thank you for all your work, Dinis. There we go.
Thanks, man. No, that's very cool, man.
Welcome to the family, Dinis.
See you, man.
Brilliant. Aloha now. Take care. Thank you, everybody.